Hey there people, how you doing? So, today we have the camera comparison between the OnePlus 9 Pro, a very hyped up smartphone with Hasselblad partnership, versus probably one of the best photography smartphones that I've used this year, the S21 Ultra. Now, there are certain things that I really want to keep an eye out for. Firstly is the color science or the color processing, because that is one of the major areas where Hasselblad really partnered up with OnePlus and made certain changes to the processing. I think that's one of the only areas where Hasselblad had any say in particular. But there is another thing that I'm really excited for, is the ultra-wide camera on the OnePlus 9 Pro. Now last year OnePlus 8 Pro had a 48 megapixel ultra-wide, but it wasn't well utilized by the software. This time I've been hearing good things about it. I've been hearing a lot about how nice the ultra-wide camera is, and so I really want to see exactly how good it is. So without any further ado, let's get started, because there are a bunch of photographs we gotta look at. So our first image right here, an ultra-wide, as you'd expect. So just look at those colors right there on the OnePlus. It is so realistic. It was right before dusk, and man, the warmth is so well represented. It's not overwhelming or anything like that, but the colors on the leaves are so natural yet so nice and vibrant. The S21 is not bad, but clearly the OnePlus is taking an upper hand here. Also, details are phenomenal on the OnePlus's ultra-wide camera here. I mean, that's understandable. It is a large 50 megapixel sensor. So now let's punch into the main camera, and yeah, the situation is apparently reversed, because now the S21 has way better colors. It is representing the warmth really well. Look at those leaves. But the OnePlus, for some odd reason, it is completely washed out, and this is a trend. It's not an anomaly or anything like that of OnePlus's main cameras, and we'll see more of that soon enough. But I do want to mention that the sky looks very weird on the S21 Ultra. It's got this teal feel to it, and that just doesn't look natural. But other than that, the S21 Ultra is doing a really good job with the colors here. Now for this backlit image, well, for the most part, it is very similar. The colors and the dynamic range as a whole, it's very similar on both. I do want to say that there is a little bit more sharpness and just a tad bit more contrast on the OnePlus 9 Pro. It's why the leaves look a little bit more distinguished, but other than that, there's really no other difference. So for all intents and purposes, I do want to call this one a tie, but if I really had to pick one, I might as well go for the OnePlus 9 Pro, because it's got a little bit more contrast in there. Now this image here, well, I would say the natural and most accurate look would be something in between the two, because the S21 is slightly more vibrant while the OnePlus is a little too desaturated. But again, if I had to pick one, I'd go with the S21. It just looks better. Not the most realistic, but definitely better. The yellow in the flowers, the leaves, it pops so well. It looks amazing on the S21 Ultra. So for this image, backlit by the sun, I mean, yeah, very harsh condition right here. But the S21 grandly screwed up here, because I did take multiple images, but the result was the same. There is this ghastly looking glare from the sun, and it does not look nice. Now, lens flare is fairly similar on both. You can see the OnePlus does have a little bit, but yeah, the OnePlus is definitely containing the sun much better. It's not washing out the entire image like the S21 Ultra. I think it deserves a major win in this regard. Now, this one right here is a 500% cropped in photograph from the ultra-wide cameras on both. Now, you might initially not notice too much difference. That is essentially because the S21 Ultra has incredible software processing for the ultra-wide. That's the reason why even with 12 megapixels, it is still able to capture so much detail. But let's face it, there is a bunch of artifacting and over sharpening going on here. The processing is doing some work, but it doesn't exactly compensate for so much resolution. The OnePlus 9 Pro on the other hand, 50 megapixel shot right here, and it is definitely better than the S21. So yeah, it is official, the S21 Ultra's ultra-wide camera has been beaten by the OnePlus in terms of detail, and if you think about it, in terms of colors as well. Because once again, the colors are so much better, so much more natural on the OnePlus 9 Pro. The leaves have that warm hue because it's right before sunset, and it's maintained so very well. Now here's another ultra-wide shot, and it's a similar story. The colors, not to mention the detail, are definitely better on the OnePlus 9 Pro. But if we were to move on to the main camera shot, well, the situation once again reverses like we had seen previously. The S21 now has much better colors, it has intensely better detail because we are shooting at the high resolution modes, 48 megapixels on the OnePlus versus more than double, 108 megapixels on the S21 Ultra. And yes, it does serve its purpose. You can see a lot more realistic detail right here. Now please don't mistake the over sharpening and processing artifacts that you can see on the OnePlus 9 Pro for sharpness. That's not realistic, that's just, the processing trying to do something. But on the S21 Ultra, even after 500% zoom, it looks so realistic, so organic. Now this one right here, I do want to mention that the subject was really in the shade. There wasn't a lot of light to work with, but even at 3x zoom, I do think both are doing a fantastic job. There is minimal noise on both, and well, the OnePlus is pulling ahead slightly because of the slightly higher contrast. It looks a little bit more balanced, while the S21 kind of looking washed out, but other than that, not a huge difference. Like the details, colors even, very similar on both. But the moment we zoom into 10 times, well, the S21 Ultra, as anyone would expect, it pulls ahead by a fair margin even. The S21 Ultra's details are just phenomenal. Obviously there wasn't a ton of light to work with, so there is a little bit of grain here and there, but the S21 Ultra by far way better in terms of zoom, as you would expect. Now moving on to 30x zoom, well, that's where the OnePlus 9 Pro Max is out, and yeah, the S21 Ultra is by far a much better image. Now for probably one of the harshest conditions in this camera comparison, a backlit shot, that too backlit by a full-blown studio light. And as you can see, both are doing a pretty good job, but the S21 Ultra is definitely pulling ahead. Like, look at that highlight preservation right there. That's phenomenal to say the least. And there is a lot more shadow detail as well. Like, you can see the color in the wall, the blue, and even leaves have a little bit more shadow detail overall. It does look a little bit better. Now in the similar condition, I also wanted to take a macro shot because both of these have very high quality macro modes with the ultra wide cameras. But now trust me, I did take this image like 20 times on the OnePlus, but I could not for the life of me get a good properly exposed image because you can see it is too dark on the OnePlus. And secondly, the S21 Ultra can actually get closer, like the minimum focusing distance is much smaller on the S21 Ultra, as you can see right here. And I think the S21 Ultra deserves a win in that regard. Now for human subjects, well, this is always kind of an interesting topic when it comes to both OnePlus and Samsung devices. Now the S21 Ultra in particular is just nothing short of incredible with human subjects as a whole, as you can see right here. This is a pretty harsh condition for a normal selfie. Like, there is a studio light that has so many highlights on my face. There's a lot of shadows to display as well. And as you can see, the S21 Ultra is by far a better image because the OnePlus, it's not really handling the situation very well now, is it? So yeah, the S21 Ultra does take a win here. Now in medium lighting, I would say both are very close, like the skin tones and the overall detail levels, very good on both. I do think the S21 Ultra is ever so slightly sharper compared to the OnePlus, but it's the highlight control once again, both in the background and on my face. You can see that the highlights are much better preserved on the S21 Ultra compared to the OnePlus 9 Pro. I think that's a fair enough reason to hand the win to the S21 Ultra once again for this selfie portrait. Now for rear camera portraits, it's an interesting situation because these are the zoomed in portraits here, and you can get around a 2x zoom, 2x digital zoom rather, on the OnePlus 9 Pro. While on the S21 Ultra, this is a 3x optical zoom. That's right, we finally have that feature, and man, I couldn't be more glad for it because this was basically one of the only complaints that I had with regards to photography on the S21 Ultra, being able to take optically zoomed in portraits. I do think that the OnePlus 9 Pro isn't far off, but yeah, optical zoom is definitely pulling ahead. Also, the highlight control, intensely better on the S21 Ultra. Skin tones, I would say the accurate skin tone would be something in between the two, but because of the other two reasons, I'm gonna pick the S21 Ultra here. Now this is a similar condition with the 1x zoom on both, and yeah, the S21 is really red for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why it's doing that, but nonetheless, The OnePlus is pretty good. I would have picked that if we didn't have so many highlights on my face just entirely blown out. Highlight control is one of the major criterias for me at least. And this is another zoomed in portrait, but in medium lighting this time around, no studio lights or anything fancy like that. And well, I'm not a huge fan of how the colors look on the OnePlus, because I look really nauseous and green and like I'm sick or something. But on the S21 I do look very red, but even so, like the details and everything, it's so much better on the S21 that I'm still gonna go with the S21 here. Now, night mode portraits. Well, this is one of the regions where the S21 Ultra really shines, because as you can see, the OnePlus 9 Pro doesn't even have the feature here. And yeah, it's doing a fairly good job in removing the noise, but with that, it is removing every little trace of detail. It looks entirely smoothened out. I look like an oil painting right there. But the S21, as you'd expect, with night mode, it looks phenomenal. Now the same can be said for selfie night mode portraits as well. I think the S21 Ultra is like among the very few smartphones out there in the world that have this feature. It makes a huge difference, like the OnePlus 9 Pro doesn't even come close. Selfie night mode, however, is a feature that is sorely missing on the OnePlus 9 Pro. I really hope that they would add this feature, because I mean, the OnePlus should be more than capable of handling selfie night modes, right? Because the S21 Ultra has it and it's doing a phenomenal job, as you can see. It's got a lot of light, a little too much on my face, I would say. I look a little washed out, but it's still a far better image than what the OnePlus is giving us. Now, this is a normal night mode photograph, and well, for the most part, I would say the S21 is a tad bit more detailed with a little bit less grain, but like it's not even a huge difference. But one reason I feel like the S21 Ultra is a little bit better is the colors. I think it's a bit too exaggerated on the OnePlus here, contrary to, the natural color science thing that it's got going up until now. I think the blues, even the greens on the leaves, it's a bit too much. So yeah, I do like the S21 Ultra's balance of colors here. Now this right here is an outdoors night mode, and the major reason why I took this photograph even is to see exactly which phone would give me a cleaner sky and which one would have less lens flare. And for the most part, both are doing almost exactly the same job here, and both are pretty good, to be honest, because like the only slight differences that I can see, which I am positive that you guys will not be able to because YouTube compression and all that, is that the S21 Ultra probably has a little bit more artifacting in the sky compared to the OnePlus, while the OnePlus has a little bit more lens flare. It's a little bit better controlled on the S21 Ultra. Other than that, like the details, the noise reduction, it's very good on both. Now there is one feature on the S21 Ultra that the OnePlus just does not have. It's zooming in with night mode. This is 3 times optical zoom on the S21 Ultra, and I did just crop into the main camera shot on the OnePlus here, and you can see it's a massive difference. Yes, it's not the cleanest image on the S21 Ultra, but it is definitely way better than what the OnePlus can produce. Same story, but just 10 times more exaggerated for the 10 times zoom on the S21 Ultra, because yeah, you cannot even decide on what it is you're looking at on the OnePlus's image. Now for this ultra wide night mode shot, well, I think the OnePlus is really pulling far ahead here, because not only do we have way better detail, just take a look at those colors right there. The S21 Ultra, for some reason, it just couldn't handle the balance, because we have this red and magenta hue all over. The sky looks freaking purple. Even the leaves, they look completely washed out and they've lost their color essentially. The OnePlus is doing a much better job in that regard, if you ask me. Now let us move on to a very ultra low light situation. I could barely see anything at all. And I do want to point out that the OnePlus took forever to focus on this shot. It was annoying. We did finally get a good shot, and well, I gotta say, given the circumstances, it's so good on both of these devices. There are minimal differences here. The colors, especially, the OnePlus, yeah, that blue on the wall, it's a bit too much. Let's be honest here. Other than that, to be honest, it looks really nice on both. Now for the ultra wide, well, this is where things get interesting, because unlike the previous images you saw, here The detail differences and the noise reduction differences is very similar in both, and there's a good reason for that, because on the S21 Ultra we could take a maximum of 7-second exposure. That is exactly what you're looking at right now. The OnePlus took just 2 seconds, and given the fact that we have a large 50 megapixel sensor, it was able to compensate. It easily matches the amount of detail that the S21 Ultra captured with 7 freaking seconds. So it just makes me think, what if OnePlus added the ability to shoot like 4 or 5 seconds of exposure with the ultrawide camera? I think the S21 Ultra would be left in the dust. So yeah, there is a lot of potential in the OnePlus 9 Pro's ultrawide camera. I think a little bit of work and a little bit of software updates would quite possibly give us results that we didn't even know possible from these cameras. But we aren't done yet. We can't really forget the moon now, can we? And unfortunately, because it's new moon time right now, well, I couldn't really capture the moon with the OnePlus 9 Pro, but let's be honest here. To capture the moon like the S21 Ultra does, we need intense and crazy zoom, optical zoom like the S21 Ultra. The 10 times optical zoom is what allows the S21 Ultra to do such a phenomenal job. That is not to mention that we can go up to 100 freaking times zoom on the S21 Ultra for this incredibly huge moonshot. Let's face it, this is one of the few areas where 100 times zoom actually makes sense. Not just in terms of, getting close to your subject, but also in terms of the quality. So that's it for this very long camera comparison, and well, I gotta say, I am pretty impressed with the OnePlus 9 Pro there. And yes, I understand it has its limitations. There are quite a few shortcomings here. Let's break it down, shall we? We have incredible daylight photographs on both. Yes, the main camera of the OnePlus 9 Pro could use a little bit more tweaking with regards to the colors and all that, but other than that, it's incredible. As for the ultrawide, it's a clear winner on the OnePlus 9 Pro. I never really thought I would say this, but the S21 Ultra's ultrawide has been beaten, and Samsung now needs to upgrade the ultrawide cameras. Then for human subjects, well, this is where the S21 Ultra really pulls ahead, because in majority of the shots, I easily picked the S21 Ultra because it had better dynamic range, and yeah, the skin tones was hit and miss on both, to be entirely honest. I would say for the most part, skin tones are gonna depend a little bit on personal preference, but nonetheless, portrait mode with zoomed in portraits in particular, I think the S21 Ultra is clearly ahead right now. Selfies as well, easily better, not to mention all the crazy night modes with the portraits that we have. And then finally in night mode, the OnePlus 9 Pro's ultrawide camera is definitely much better, but it could use a little bit more software updates just to increase the exposure time. Like, I'm pretty sure it would be incredible if that were to actually happen. I feel like at this very moment, without any new software updates on the horizon that I know of, I would say the S21 Ultra still edges out the OnePlus 9 Pro. Just by a little, not a huge difference or anything like that, but it definitely edges it out. So with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, do hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will be seeing you guys later. Cheers.